make it work a little quicker. And it's also what's in the watercolor pigment to make the pigment. It's made of, the binder is gum arabic. So this acts almost like a turpentine, thins things out. I often play around with drawing with it to start the watercolor, because I'm very unusual. And then I allow
Do you watercolor? No.
the idea of the space that I'm extracting to lead me across the surface and hopefully give me something of some value. You never know. I remember one time you guys watched me do a whole disaster. Very nice about it. It's terrible. So if you notice, I'm using the cloth, I'm flattening everything out. I'm not worried about folds because I'm not using that to copy. I'm using that for shapes. This in the representational work, all that cloth, when you use it, say, underneath a ground to make a shadow, to make the shadow come up, it's called a found abstraction. Representation, of painters that are very good do not invent it, they find it. And then they work from that and do with it whatever they want. In abstraction, you're trying to control what's going on that surface, and that's how you do it. Now, as everyone knows, the big problem is the color. Now, personally, I would just paint black and white and be perfectly happy. But since the world wants color, I have to deal with it. It's very annoying. So I'm working with a yellow and an orange and a blue, which I will intermix, play with until I get something of some value.
Green.
Pretty simple. Watercolor
Yellow,
is pretty
orange,
simple.
and blue.
The first thing I learned about watercolor is not complex. It's the simplest medium you'll ever use. It's the hardest because we're the problem. The medium is simple. We're the problems because we try to force it to do something that it's not made to do. If we just be at peace, everything will be fine. Now I change color to match what I want it to do. And of course, the secret to watercolor is water. I'm still trying to convince this school to let us do our watercolor class at a local pool, but they just don't seem to agree somehow. So I'm looking for a thrust. The thrust is invisible, so I have to force it up through and across the pool, and then work with that. No. The startling thing is the next color. In watercolor, everything is timing. If you don't time, your effect will break. So I'm pushing the folds that are in the background into the foreground. So what I'm doing is trying to make the total surface part of each other. Rather than having a middle ground, background, foreground, I get rid of all that. And I tip the picture plane, as Suzanne kept telling us. And I'm trying to force the top and the bottom to meet. See what you did, Eddie? Okie dokie. Now normally, if you were a normal person, which I'm not, you would have a warm brush, cool brush, and a neutral. You'd have a bucket for each. Of course, they all end up in the same bucket, but that's not your intent. And you work with only 3 colors at a time. That does not mean necessarily that you only work with 3 colors. It just means that the colors you use, you control. That you don't set out 14 colors and then try to work with them. These guys with the large palettes have to be very neat. Otherwise, everything moves into another realm. I was thinking about, oh yeah, here we go.
That's cobalt. Sure looks like it. Or it looks like it's ultramarine, actually. I think ultramarine is more purple. I don't think so. What do you think of the cobalt?
Yeah.
I think it's ultramarine.
Frank, what blue is that? Is that cobalt?
That's yellow.
No, the blue.
I have no idea.
Oh,
It's blue.
blue. Okay.
It looks like cobalt, but you never know. I don't want to start any rumors or anything. Now, I'm slowly making it more and more abstract as I develop the shapes and movements, just using placement and rhythms to my advantage. Now, that's one of the advantages of taking things from the concrete world. You can create a whole beautiful, different reality, and nobody knows what the hell it's all about. That's what you want. Of course, you know we're going to wipe this out with gesso, so it doesn't. The great advantage of that is that nobody knows you know what you're doing. You hide everything. And if you notice, I'm constantly working the width and the breadth of the painting. You don't want to get in a trap where you start working only one idea in the painting and not thinking of the rest, because it gets you in trouble. You know, it's amazing, we got lights now and I can actually see what I'm doing. No longer a guess. Now, a lot of you think that's going to stay yellow, but boy, you just don't know.
I like it. I like it very much.
Really?
I like it very much. Almost my favorite flavor. I'm not sure. See, my color. Oh, it looks good on me. If
knock the chroma down just with the simple idea of water reducing the pigment. And that's why watercolorists tend to like watercolor. In oil, it's much more difficult. Oil, in actuality, is a much more complex. The acrylic painters certainly would benefit by doing more watercolor before they do their acrylics. Because watercolor gives you a thin control, from thin to thick, and you're not in such a big hurry to lay down big brassy colors and then spend the rest of your life covering them.
Like my gold leaf.
Okay, here we go. Now this is, I don't know what's gonna happen here. This is gonna be silly, I gotta tell you. Here's the third color, which will make the fourth and the fifth. Oh yeah, Carol, this is orange.
Thanks. Yes. Yes.
Now I use a card because I'm working fast and I'm working pretty much wet to damp. And in order to do this thing before midnight, I have to work that way. Card helps me to control the color. So I can keep areas that I want to work in fresh. And I don't have to beat myself up about it. Now I twist it and turn that. So now we go into here.
So this comes to an orange blue.
And the abstraction is starting to happen in a very odd way. I don't know how that happened. Must be a mistake. So there's your basic three colors. And now you go to your next three colors, whatever they're going to be. Or one. But you have complete control of the palette. Isn't that easy enough? Now the other thing is, as you know, in oil painting or acrylic painting, you're constantly able to go in with solid color and push things up and make them change their position just by opacity. In watercolor, it's a little more complicated. If you don't want to go to gouache, which I will in a minute, because I don't care, the purist can't. The purist has to use the paper. In other words, they're in love with the transparency, so they're stuck. Fortunately, I don't have that problem. I can mess up as much as I want. Okay, so now we're going to take the yellow and a green, and that'll be the mix from the primary idea into the paint. And then we don't know what's going to happen. Now, at this point, everything can fall apart. Isn't that nice? In other words, no risk, no gain. The thing about painting, it separates great painting and great painters from people who do nice work, is risk. Is taking chances, pushing beyond the limit every once in a while to break new ground. That takes a whole different personality. The other thing is that spatial painters are a different breed altogether. No matter what style they use, the idea of the painting is always about the space. Are we organizing that? If we're not happy. And if we are, we're foolish. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna try to work that sucker in.
much of the card. You think?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Looks like you. Your work.
Listen, sometimes I get it right. I know it's not awful.
Right now, he's got a piece of.
Okay, I'm using a form of stroke, which is pretty common to painters, stain painters, field painters. It's called broken color. A lot of you use it in big abstractions. I use it to play color against solids, so that you'll have a broken plane against a quiet plane against what they used to call empty, I call quiet. So areas that have no color in them become quiet planes that you have to shift. And they're essential to really good painting. At least that's what they told me last week. Now, I'll tell you another trick that I use when I do a painting or a watercolor. I put them in the window and let the sun bleach them. Knocks out all the excess color. I don't have to work so hard. And nature does what it's supposed to. Here we go, the dirty. I'm constantly making dirty water for an obvious reason. Now, not sure. Just by tinting the paper, I can change its perspective. That's interesting. That makes any sense. You notice, I take the paint from the surface and use it like a palette, which controls the tint of the color and allows me to move the space and the shapes and the forms around. Now, I don't need big shapes all the time. The biggest shape up here is the paper. So I'm attaching everything I do to the paper. Paper is not, and not everything is sitting on top of the paper. Some of that's going inside, some of it's coming up, theoretically. Now, let's go for broke. Let's do something really dumb, just for the hell of it. Here we go. Okay, children. Oh, you're cute, aren't you?
You want this?
See that?
And the blue family,
To me.
keeping
Or
it
no, that's
close,
cerulean, maybe. That is
picking up the one thing I've avoided.
cerulean.
this ought to kill the painting, no doubt. We have something to work with. Now, the beauty of watercolor is its transparency. Lets you get away with an awful lot that you can't get away with with other medium.
Yeah.
If you keep the color
This looks like a Chicago.
from being too workable, unworkable, you have to constantly play with it, shift it, and pray. Okay. Still two warms and a cool. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Okay, now,
but then green and blue.
what we'll do,
Green
put a
and
little
blue.
more dressing on it, and then we'll just work.
Oh,
See what happens. Pretty much done that already. What I did is I took the color of a cloth, which I found floating around in the background. They wrapped it around a bunch of stuff and pulled it up and made a plane out of it. Now, nothing new about that. That's pretty old hat. But it does work.
yeah.
Add one more color. What could we do? What haven't we destroyed? Oh, oh good. That's a nice color.
So when you said you pulled out a plane,
Yeah.
Did
it's
you-
right here. And then I took this and I made a plane here. And I did another plane here.
okay,
Got rid of the edges, let it float in, but I needed to get the scale right or the painting just wouldn't work. It would just sit there and laugh at me all night. Painting can get nasty. You drink enough, you really start to listen. So now this is the last color I would use to key up certain elements within it. To create what they call a certain energy that may or may not be interesting, but may set the eye up for kind of a sound that you feel with it, that the painting's trying very desperately.
and he's moving across.
And it needs it in order for the painting to start to sing. You don't want it to be too silent, because then it's boring. And one thing you don't want, you don't care if you end up with mud, but you don't want to end up with boredom.
So he's going in a circle.
Now, it's a pretty simple
Yeah.
motif, not too complex.
It added so much, Frank, the red.
See, it just gives it just a little bit. And that's towards the end of the painting. I never throw that up until I've set the painting up because I'm not sure of what's going to do until I see the elements in function. And that gives me an idea.
What guided your decisions on where to put the red?
Well, I saw that red going through there, and I decided I'd just use it.
Okay.
I mean, what the hell, it's my painting.
It looks like you put it sort of in a, like an oval.
That's right, I got rid of it being solid. I broke it into like I always think in terms of sparks of light or pieces of sound. Like when I paint, I hear music in my head. Of course, my wife says it's probably because I'm crazy. But I react to it. And it's like I'm very much in love with the oboe. I think the oboe is a magnificent instrument, just isn't played enough. And I hear it all the time when I paint.
I'm sorry.
And I guess because I'm the only one in my family who can't play anything. You know, if I had a bucket and sang in it, the bucket would cry. So it really annoys me. So I kind of try to do that in my painting when I'm developing it. Also, this is a kind of break from the autumn, where there's a struggle in nature trying to relive itself. Ah, I saw you. You can't get away from me. Aha. No. That just won't do. Thank you very much. Ah. You thought you could, but you can't. Orange.
Gosh, that's gorgeous. Ah.
So, I think, I can't see it, my nose is too close to it, but everything should be in motion. As you look across the plane, it should be easy to take in the surface. Even though it's got 1,001 little marks in it, you begin to silhouette, kind of bring it together in your mind. You will not evidently get what I get, but you'll certainly get something outside of border, which I try to avoid at all costs.
Frank, when you began the painting with the
Yep.
blues up there, I didn't understand what drove that decision, where you took
The
it
blue
from.
in there. I just changed its hue.
Okay.
In other words, when you're looking at something concrete and you're trying to establish it, you're trying to break as far away from the literal as you can get to enter an abstract world. Now the abstract world is made up of all kinds of venues, not just one. There are broad planes, like I could have done 3 broad planes here and gone home, same thing. But if you're trying to get the action and the realities of something by picking up and changing hues of color to make a movement or a sound, something more than a decoration. That's what you're struggling with. The space will give you that every time. Your music moves you to another level. I mean, I was looking at a group of paintings by Mitchell, who was really quite good, better than some of the stuff I've seen. And she does the same thing. She was about 2 miles upstream from Giverny in France. So she was looking at nature. She wasn't inventing that thing out of her head. She had 2 things going for her. She had nature that she could take from and pure rage to paint with.
She's a big drinker.
Oh, was she?
And you certainly can understand it.
A big what? Drinker.
She's a big drinker.
And torrid love affair.
I use one of these. I got a painting now that I have to shave. All the hair is covered.
Oh.
So I just painted the hair into the painting. Now I have a hairy painting. I was thinking of selling it to a barber. Now, while the painting is damp, you can mess with it, you can play with it, you can pick up the color, you can knock the color down. You can do anything you want. Okay, we'll let this rest. You want to get coffee, get a cup of water, whatever. And then when this is damp, we'll white it out. Because without the referee, I'd be making it up, and that's not necessarily good. In other words, there's two ways of using that. One is to look at it, work from memory, which I've done, to a great disaster. But when you're pulling something up, you're looking for shapes and movements and form that help you locate scales, shapes, and movements on your surface. But if you're doing it just from your head, you have no identity to the work. It's all pure neurotic. Yeah, you don't want to be everything to be nature. You want nature and intellect to mix. And that's the difference between Hoffman's approach, say, and the New York School approach, which was blind eye. Blind eye only works for a certain period of time, and it's great for experimentation, but it will not develop any master paintings at any point, because you get into repetition. Now, I've done 100 of these, none of them are alike.
Even probably of this.
Now, in this painting,
Even of the same.
there is a structure, a basic structure, which you don't, which you dare not change.
No.
And
You
you
work
just fool
around
around with everything else that hangs and drapes on it. Now, what is the structure?
It's right there. See that
I
stick?
know, that's a lot for it right there.
No, just look at the stick. And then the square, which is the flowers.
Okay.
I could take that square, which I did, I took the little bunch, I removed myself from what's going on
right
behind it, and just used the square of the bunch because of the size of my
On the
paper.
upper right-hand side.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I played with that. Then I only used in there what I needed, nothing else.
You haven't used any of the background.
Very little, except for the red cloth going through there.
Okay.
So you pick and choose. Now another painter would do it different. They would take that whole background and make it plain.
Yeah.
You can do that, but then you get in trouble with how much you can paint it in. Now watercolor is not that doable. It can get away from you pretty quick. So you have to be careful with how big an area you get, what the color you're using to get it with, and that sort of, that helps.
This was, to me, I would have difficulty finding out how many planes you have there.
Well,
I could
the
make
planes,
an
now,
ignorant guess.
like I teach you guys all the time, I don't talk about planes too much. I talk about volume. Because everything is a plane. This movement right here is a plane. That's the plane. This is a plane. This whole plane right here. This is a plane. See, they're there. They're not edges. I'm not mapping them out. What's more important is the position of the volume. The plane will reduce everything to geometry, but the volume has an organic, it belongs to a shape. You can use anything. And it's the weight of that volume that you're constantly changing. In oil or in acrylic or any other medium, you do it by reducing the chroma, increasing the chroma. That's how you control your shift in movement. You make something transparent or you make something more opaque.
If you're working in a plane, then the chroma of everything in that plane has to be the same intensity.
Not necessarily. It's position. Like here, I'll show you right here. If I take this and I run it about right here, I change the relationship of this to that. Every time you make a stroke or every time you put down a weight, you're changing the relationship it's on. The other thing you can notice, it's not too flat, which is another thing I believe flat's a dead issue. Flat's gone. You have to start moving more into controlled three-dimensional concepts. Not because flat is bad, it's because it's been done to death. Painters have been avoiding the three-dimension, that's why they're gluing stuff. They don't know how to use it anymore. Doing 3D on a two-dimensional plane is one of the most complicated things you do and the most satisfying you get to as an abstract painter. And it only done by overlapping and shifting. That's what you're doing.
Overlapping and shifting. Shifting. What does he mean by shifting?
I can't wait to wipe this out.
Does he? I can take a picture. Formula.
That's the best part of the work. Okay, we'll take a break.
That's gorgeous, Frank.
It is beautiful.